Thank you very much indeed for rejoining us here on the Value Raters Class Act in association with Tip TV Sports. Now, we've rattled through the Value Raters eye catchers for the weekend's racing, and they're the ones you certainly want to put in your notebook. If you missed out, In Lace was the one that we want to see dropping back to 7 furlongs, maybe even at Goodwood is where we expect to see In Lace next. But the big thing on everyone's lips is the Ascot Gold Cup this year. Thursday, 4:20 p.m. is exactly when that will kick off. Now it's time to really go, I think we're going to go horse by horse in terms of where the current betting order lies, to pick apart to see who will be receiving that some 230,000 and that prestigious moment when, of course, the Queen hands you the Gold Cup. Where else to start than the unbeaten Dermot Weld, jolly in the race, Forgotten Rules?
Yeah, Forgotten Rules, best price. This is obviously recorded on a Tuesday evening, 5-2. I just don't get it. I don't understand why he's so short. Very concerned about the ground. He's got a very, very high knee action. I thought, even though he won last time over the mile 6 on good ground, he looked very, very uncomfortable on the ground for me. I just don't get it. He's very lightly raced. He's a Group 2 winner, a Group 3 winner. So, you know, that's a thing you like to see in a horse stepping up to a Group 1, but I just don't get it at the price.
I mean, the ground is undoubtedly quick. As we record this here on Tuesday evening and you watch it live on Tuesday evening, Night of Thunder was the one that disappointed in the opener, the Queen Anne at Ascot. On the trainer, Richard Hannon came out and said, quite simply, there's absolutely no give in the ground, and you would definitely want give for Forgotten Rules, who obviously won in very heavy ground in the Long Distance Cup last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason the price is so short is because you can look at it and say, well, the form's worked out well. I mean, he beat the 4-horse Kingfisher, who also runs in the Gold Cup. I mean, look how far that he beat him. He beat him a good 6 lengths. Now, that horse has been out and won a race, but let's not remember, he was beating the same horses that he beat in that race. So it's another example, really, of the Lockinge form. When you look at it, and you always look behind and just check that there's not the same horses you're beating. So I'm not sure, I can't have Kingfishers. I'm not sure what he's beaten so far. He's clearly a very good horse. I'm very concerned about the ground, and I think this race is a lot deeper at 5-2. You've got to take him on.
Do you find, Value Rater, without quickly getting into the other ones, I know Mizu is one that we'll talk about next, currently around the 9-2 mark, but do you find with races such as the Ascot Gold Cup, now this is a 2-mile 4 flat race, the very highest class, the very highest level of 2-mile 4 flat racing, when else in the season do we get to judge form over 2.5 miles in the very top level?
Yeah, we don't, quite simply, and I'm a great believer that not many horses stay that. You know, these extreme distances on the flat, there isn't many that, you know, that just isn't many that do that. But I do think when I'm looking for a winner of this particular race, you know, I do think it's important, if you look back over the years, usually you know, you're a group winner. I like to have them having group form. I don't particularly like a listed race going straight into here.
Okay.
And more importantly is that I know it's a 2.5 mile race, and you'll hear me say this plenty on the shows from week to week. In these Group 1 races, it's not just about staying. You must be able to quicken. And if you can't quicken, you won't win. And something like an Ascot Gold Cup, I think it's very important that I don't like horses that are held up. You've got to sit even in the first 4, because when you quicken from the front, if you're too far behind, I mean, look at those great horses that won the Gold Cup. It was always that great turn of foot. Happens in the Derby, doesn't it? You know, that's what makes a Group 1 winner.
Well, if you don't like those held-up runners over 2-mile 4, you would have been in your shaky boots on Clondor Warrior in the Ascot Stakes today, as Ryan Moore really did work the oracle and fly him out wide to drive that one home. But back to the Gold Cup, let's, as I say, go to the second in the betting. Having discounted the current anti-post jolly Forgotten Rules, let's go on to Mizu, the Sagaro Stakes winner, however, then was beaten by Vent de Force and Forever Now, I do believe.
Yeah, very interesting, this horse. I was saying to you before we come on air, I do write for the Race and Head magazine, and I had to do an article, and this was my selection. Admittedly, at the time, it was 20-1, and now we're talking about 9-2. And the reason I backed it at 20-1 is I was very impressed with it over the mile 6 at Ascot, and it was a listed race. But he came from a long way back that day and quickened up nicely. He was beating only a short head. If you wind the tape on, he goes clear of those particular horses. He was stepped up to the 2 miles. Again at Ascot, this time in Group 3 company, had desired effect on good to firm ground, which of course it's going to be. And again, He was towards the back of the I'll say mid division of the field, and had to swing 5 deep into the home straight and quickened, which I like to see. Went on to beat Vent de Force and Forever Now. Obviously very lightly raced, only having his 7th start, of which he's won 4 times and been placed once. He's got plenty of form at Ascot. Could be anything. Would I be taking the 9-2 about him? Absolutely not. I'm pleased I've got the value at 20-1. I think he's too short now.
This is for me, somebody who's not overly confident on nailing down those form lines. This is for me where it gets slightly confusing, because I look at it, and the next one we talk about, Vent de Force, which we obviously mentioned then went and beat the horse at Sandown. Where do we pick? Which one comes out on top? You know, it's like Manny Pacquiao beating Floyd Mayweather, 2 months before, and then reopposing, and Mayweather turning it around. Who is the champ going into this race?
Yeah, well, this is interesting, because when he met Mizzou at Ascot, Richard Hughes was on that day, the same as when he was on when they won at Sandown. But he broke well at Ascot, and for some reason Richard Hughes then restrained the horse at the back of the field. Then he had to make ground, and just at a critical time around the furlong pole, he went for a gap and had to take a pull. At this time, Mizzou was quickening, couldn't get back at the horse, was only beaten actually 2 lengths. Half a furlong out, if you look, he's 4 lengths. I thought he did very well to make inroads into that 2 lengths when they've hit the line. Forever Now back in 3rd. Now, when that horse came to Sandown, I think Richard must have learnt from that, because he thought to himself, right, sat down, a good tacticianer, right, what should we do now? I'll take him from the front. And it was a very tactical ride, and what he kept on doing was quickening. Great ride, that. I think this horse is a very strong stare, will definitely get the trip, and could well overturn that form with Mizzou now, going into an Ascot Gold Cup.
I think what we're saying then is, for some people, they've only got time to, flip open the form line like you have there and say, oh, he's 4th there, 3rd there, beaten there, and then come to conclusion. You've got to go back and look at the race in these ones where there's 2.5 miles to consider. Absolutely. You've got to see whether they got the run in the race or not. Now, one that I know you're slightly sweet on, I think this would be Forever Now. The John Gosden and Dettori have really struck up a partnership, no less with Star of Seville bagging the French Oaks over the weekend. Yeah. Forever Now comes in here, but a big price on this one, I believe.
Yeah, he is a huge price, this horse at the moment. Not from a win purpose, but from each way purpose. I mean, again, we go back to this, which I think is a real key piece of form, this 2-mile race at Ascot, where you've got Mizzou and Vent de Force. Now, Forever Now was beaten 3 1/4 lengths in that race.
Is this the Cigaro? Yeah, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, be the Cigaro Stakes.
Yeah. And that day, Frankie Dettori made all on the horse. So we've got a complete difference. That day, Frankie Dettori made all. Richard Hughes held up. He managed to finish 3rd in that race. And then at Sandown, for some reason, Frankie Dettori decided not to lead, and Richard Hughes decided to lead, which I thought was a very strange move, considering that this horse, what it doesn't do is quicken. I think the reason they put a lot of pace into 2 miles was like, we stay very well. What was interesting about that race when Forever Now was 3rd to Mizzou, and again, you'll hear me on the show saying plenty of this, but I do like looking past the line. And for a horse that was beaten 3 1/4 lengths, which I believe to be 2 stayers in front of it, when they've hit the line, if you just wind the tape up in the pull-up area, Forever Now shoots past both of them for having been beat that. Now, he clearly stays well, but if you watched his race at Sandown in a steady race, he looked like he was a non-stayer. He will definitely get the trip. What he is quicker, and he won't win an Ascot Gold Cup, but what I do think, I could see him easily running into a place, but he just has not got that, got that pace.
Well, I think Frankie Dettori is quite simply going to have to go for one of those 2 options. The horse is drawn in still 1. Yeah. Now, from there at Ascot, as we know, you either have to bolt out and take up the running or settle for something in behind. I hope for your sake, by the sounds of it, that he does get himself in a positive position. Seemed to favour the horse when reopposing before. Now, one moving from the Italian jockey to the French horse, there's certainly been an international flavour around this year's Royal Ascot, although we present you with news that California Chrome has been withdrawn from the Prince of Wales Stakes from the American side of you. But Tag de Boistron, obviously bred in France and loves that soft ground, 2nd in an Ormond Stakes where the mud was flying, disappointed on that day for favourite backers.
He say disappointed. I mean, Clever Cookie is obviously not going to run in this race. I thought the horse was a very interesting runner. They've obviously, I'm not sure why it's not running, perhaps the ground, but I thought Clever Cookie was a very interesting runner in this race. So I don't think it's any disgrace giving Clever Cookie £7 for a length and a quarter beating. I thought that was okay, actually. Of all the horses we're going to be talking about here, he's the highest rated on my ratings, a mark of 124. Now, he's definitely got the class. He's a Group 1 winner. 8-year-old now, though. That's the thing I don't particularly like about the horse. 8-year-old, he's looking exposed, and I think he might well need some soft ground to be at his best. But I haven't said that. 16-1. I do think he's slightly overpriced, but
I think if you look at previous winners, you know, leading light estimate, they were both 4 or 5 year olds. We go back to the likes of Yates, you know, that one at 4, 5, 6. You're quite right. When they seem to get onto their twilight, such as Tat de Boistron and others we'll touch on, maybe that race, that game isn't in them anymore. You know, you really need to be a game stayer in here,
Yeah.
and you need one of these boisterous 4-year-olds possibly.
Yeah, and that's what it, you know, it's normally, like all these big races, it normally goes to unexposed horses, you know, likely improvers. They don't generally get. Let's put it this way: if Tack de Bolsteren won, you'd be quite disappointed from a form point of view going forward for the race, being the fact he's 8 years old and got that mark at 117.
Sure. So sticking with the international flavour, more importantly, is Maxime Gouillon, who takes the ride on Batheron. Now, we've talked about form that we've seen in front of our eyes at Ascot in the Cigaro Stakes. We've talked about form that we've seen at Sandown. How do you judge a Group 2 at Longchamp?
Well, as you probably just seen my body language, I'm getting a bit more forward here. So, no, this is my selection for the Gold Cup. And he was a little bit of an afterthought because when I did the article that I did some time ago, he hadn't actually ran back then. But this horse last time we seen at Longchamp in a Group 2, he led all the way that day, which is really interesting because before that, the horse has been held up. And as I said at the beginning of this piece, is that I am looking for a horse up in the front that'd be able to quicken, and he did that. He seemed led, and he quickened and quickened and quickened. What's interesting is the second horse that day was a horse called Glaring, who went off 9-4. Now, he beat it 2.5 lengths, really in command in the final 100 yards. That horse came out and was fourth behind Vent de Force before that. Right. There's a strict form line that would put him, admittedly, a length behind Vent de Force, but I don't know, he fills my eye. When I watched it, his races back over in France, I was like, wowee. You know, he looks full of class. The ground won't be an issue. He's a beautiful moving horse. When I went back to last season in a Group 1, he was only touched off a neck by High Jinx. Now, when I watched
that was in the Prix de Cadran, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
In October. Yeah.
And he was pushed along High Jinx to make it all. He was right at the back of the field. Nothing else was really coming from the back. He did ever so well that day. More positive tactics. That was over 2.5 miles. Proves he stays. He's another one that he could do it. I'd like him to sit in mid-division, but at the moment I believe he's around the 12-1 mark, and I don't know, I'll be very disappointed if he's not in the shake-up.
It seems a nice race, and what is important about this horse, Batheron, is, as you said, you do need pace to win this race. You can't just stay. He had no doubt as a turn of foot, Matt. Yeah,
absolutely. And I love the way he quickened from the front last time. And, you know, he didn't make them silly, he only won 2.5 lengths. But when I was watching replays, because when I look at form, it's not just about what we've got on the paper here, because that will only tell you so much. You know, I like to watch every horse's run back. And this was the horse where my eyes widened.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, oh, you know, you've got some class. I think he's a huge runner in here.
And despite, of course, finishing midfield behind Brown Panther in the Dubai Gold Cup, this has been Madame Pia Brandt's real goal since that Prix de Cadran run in October. So apparently, since after the horse finished that run in October, it's on the agenda. We're going for the Ascot Gold Cup. That's what you've got to like.
Yeah, I have. And I mean, the Meydan form, it is very different form. It's very different climate. There's all those kind of things you can say. And I was just really foul for that horse when I watched it last time. And when I went back to that High Jinx, and don't forget, High Jinx obviously ties in to a lot of form and is actually in this race itself. And for me, he's an absolute moral to beat that.
OK, now one piece of form that we have to examine, otherwise I'm sure viewers would feel left out. Not only if one of your own selections is a horse we're about to mention, a piece of form that's critical to pay attention to in this race has to be the Betway Betway Yorkshire Cup. Now, the winner of that race was Snow Sky. Second back in there, the winner of that race was Trip to Paris, should I say. At Chester, Trip to Paris won the Chester Cup. And then we also had the likes of Havana Beat back in a Yorkshire Cup. They're two races that we've got to pay attention to here. Which one do you think's stronger?
Well, Trip to Paris, I mean, we're talking about, we're talking about an angle here. The best that horse has particularly done is won a Class 2 handicap.
Yeah.
You know, it very much looks like a handicap.
Very competitive handicap.
It was second to obviously the Vent de Force, but as I say, that was a very, very tactical affair that, and I just think that horse had things. I think that horse had probably been used to those kind of tactical affairs and could adapt on the day. For me, he just wouldn't have a chance in this race.
Okay, that's Trip to Paris. The other one that I mentioned in the other piece of form, which was the Yorkshire Cup, Havana Beat. Now, there was one horse that was coming into this race stealing all the headlines, and that was Brown Panther. Brown Panther's subsequently been withdrawn. Havana Beat was only a couple of lengths back on the day they're up at York, Matt.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had to look at him a couple of times. When I first looked, and I looked again, I did have him run into quite a high mark. He's only a listed runner, not sure he's got the class for this. And again, I think he's a horse that lacks that turn of foot. I'm not sure he does everything very, very quickly. But I did go and have a look. I mean, I did rate him that day 122, and that's what made me think, oh, I better go and have a look at this. He's only won a listed race. That's my problem with him. I could see him plodding on late on, but I can't see him finishing in the frame, Tom.
I mean, I suppose my question to you is that should Snow Sky have taken a place in this year's Ascot Gold Cup, would you be backing him?
Snow Sky obviously stayed very well last year, wasn't it? Went on to win, went on to be third in the Ledger.
And won the Yorkshire Cup.
And won the Yorkshire Cup. I mean, it's a very good horse. My concern is that, like the likes of Havana Beat, didn't have the pace to go with that horse.
Okay. Moving on then, a few more in the field just to discuss. Simonon, an old boy, 8 years old as well, but he's been here before. He was only a neck behind the Queen's Horse Estimate and twice an Ascot winner over the 2.5 mile trip.
You better have the chair for this, Tom, because this is your charity bet. So you tell everyone why you fancy it.
In terms of charity bets, worth just saying, just to interrupt this very briefly, we are both going to have a £100 charity stake courtesy of Betway, and we'll be announcing. Sorry, courtesy of Betfair. I do apologise, and that will be announced just in the third part of the show. We've got Betfair's Barry Orr joining us in the third part to give us all of the market movers ahead of the Gold Cup, and that £100 bet will hopefully reap some rewards for the chosen charities. If we can discard...
Do you want to, if we just talk about Cinnamon a little bit?
Oh, if you want to.
Your reason. And
well, for me then, Matt, it was beating a neck behind Estimate in a Gold Cup. Okay, so it can run in these conditions, in this 2.5 mile at Ascot. It's won over the trip twice. It was 5th behind Leading Light last year. And I just feel that every time I back this horse, it's always put its all in. I know that it's going to be a genuine run. I know it's not going to be a big hold-up, like you say. They will put it in there prominently. And at odds of something like 14 or 16 to 1, that's where I'll put my money for a bit of excitement.
Well, I hope you're right, Tom. I mean, personally, I can't have the horse. I've got a big problem with horses that have been to these races. He's been to this race 3 times. He's an 8-year-old. He's been found out. And the reason I say that with any of these big races, if a horse has been there, unless those races have been won by, which I see to be an absolute great, like the likes of Yates, and you think, well, you can give him another chance. That kind of form, the Estimate form, as far as he was beaten that day, I'd be disappointed if he filled the frame for me, because I think it would devalue the form. He's been there 3 times, he's been beat 3 times. Why is he going to do it a 4th time?
What you're saying is the ones, the younger ones in there, you think are.
Yeah, I think there's better value, but I will be cheering you on, and these are the. Obviously, the charity bits we have on the screen now.
Yeah, so as it works, any winnings will be donated to the Injured Jockeys Fund. Valuerator and I both have a £100 free bet courtesy of Betfair. So thank you very much to Betfair for putting those up. Valuerator, just to put a line through it, why have you gone for Batheron?
Batheron, as we've talked about, that French form really took my eye last time. Full of class, loved the ground. I'd be disappointed with that whether he's out the frame. Batheron.
Okay, and for me, it is Simonon, the old old proven stayer, the old proven Gold Cup performer, at odds of 14 to 1. Hopefully be paying for a couple of new saddles or boots there at the Injured Jockeys Fund. Very much again, thank you to Betfair for putting that £100 free charity bet up for us. After the break, we are joined by the big Irish chap, Barry Orr, will be live on the line to discuss all of the latest market movements around the Ascot Gold Cup. He'll be joining us live from the Betfair studios, and we'll see you after the break.